And I'm working on a project called Duo Search. And really what we're doing is building infrastructure on top of OpenBazaar for buyers specifically. And I've been in this journey for 7 months, completely immersing myself. And I'm one of the few passionate ragtags that Andreas was talking about yesterday that is kind of bringing forward this potential tsunami of innovation in the field of e-commerce and trade online. My talk is going to be split in 5 parts. Characteristics of the OpenBazaar network and how it's relevant for entrepreneurs who want to build on top of the system. I'm going to also give a survey of the ecosystem, tell you what the core assets of the current ecosystem are. I'm then going to tell you a bit about the story of OpenBazaar, of Duo Search, kind of as a case study of what it's like to build on OpenBazaar. And then I'll give you a bunch of ideas, quick-fire ideas. I've prepared a list. These are business ideas that you can just go ahead and run with. These are opportunities for entrepreneurs. And I'm going to give, again, a list of prepared tips that hopefully will be helpful if you start your journey building cool stuff on OpenBazaar. And I invite you to ask questions after each of these sections. And actually, I also invite you to ask questions now if there are a few unanswered questions from the previous talk, or if you have anything to ask. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Yeah. No? Okay. Cool. So characteristics of OpenBazaar. OpenBazaar, for me, the key thing is that it's open innovation. And it's all about what Andreas talked about, this tsunami of innovation. And we're at the very beginning. There was Amir Taki that kind of started the whole thing, and we're slowly moving underwater. And what I'm interested as an entrepreneur is really to hit this elbow of the exponential curve, reach a point where we reach parity with the existing systems, and we go beyond them. So I guess from the point of view of the entrepreneur, it's kind of good to have a mental model of how the ecosystem is structured. And the way I think about it is that there is a very fat core protocol. So as Sam described, there's this pure technology protocol which tries to do as much as possible of the application logic of doing trade online. So that includes identity, payments with Bitcoin, moderation, search, and a whole bunch of other things. And around this core, the idea is to have thin, small applications orbiting around it, providing not so critical applications and services. And one of the consequences of having this core in the middle is that from the point of view of the entrepreneur, you need to analyze the system for its limitations. So where the technology stops is where the business opportunities begin. So one example is search. The technology is kind of limited for search, and that became an opportunity for Duo Search to build. But the flip side of that, and it's important to keep in mind as an entrepreneur, is that technological progress can also destroy business opportunities. And one example here is with IPFS and the OpenBazaar 2.0 destroyed the business opportunity of building denial of service protection services, such as integrating like Cloudflare with Cloudflare. And in OpenBazaar 2.0, we're also going to have Tor, which is a technological progress, and this removes the need for VPNs or other privacy services. Another thing to kind of understand is that the core technology is decentralized tech and is quite advanced. It's quite exotic. And one of the things that means is that it's kind of very disconnected in a way to what we have right now. It doesn't integrate well with current payment systems. It doesn't integrate very well with the current internet and the current user interfaces that users have come to expect. And so there's a lot of work for the entrepreneur to build gateways and build bridges between the existing systems and the current very technical core protocol. I guess one last thing I'll say about the general characteristics of OpenBazaar is that because it's open innovation, it's really great to get started. You can just get started with one single feature, very lightweight. You can have a very small market of even one person, be hyper-local, like Andrea said yesterday. And that's perfectly fine to get started. On the flip side, there are some questions which are raised. For example, what are the business models in a system where everything is designed to be free? And how do you build a service and try and make a profit if in the face of competition where open innovation means also open competition? So that's the end of my first part. Any questions so far? Okay, cool. So let's move on to the survey of the ecosystem. The way I see it is the ecosystem has four really core assets. The first one is the group of interested people in OpenBazaar. As Sam said, there have been hundreds of thousands of downloads of the software. And that goes to show how much interest there is. Now, this group of people is generally Bitcoiners, generally idealists and enthusiasts. They're generally quite politically motivated, anarchists or libertarians. And they will try to show interest for the project. So one of the things we've noticed as we've tried to publicize Duo Money is every time we write a Reddit post with some cool OpenBazaar stuff, it just rises to the very top of the Bitcoin subreddit in no time. So that's kind of nice. The second core asset of the OpenBazaar ecosystem is the group of vendors and moderators. These are people who are extremely dedicated to OpenBazaar and really tie in with the vision. They've been around for 6 months. And to give you an idea, at DuoSearch we've seen around 5,000 moderators and vendors with at least one listing. And of those, there's about 300 which are online at any point in time. So we've had quite a natural selection of the really enthusiastic people. And these guys are true warriors. They're able to withstand issues and crashes and all sorts of stuff that make their life difficult as a seller and as a moderator, but they will continue on because they really believe in the project. And that is really, I think, a core asset in the community that we should try and leverage as we try and reach the mainstream. And the way I think about it is a bit like Etsy. Etsy is a marketplace which was bootstrapped by the feminist movement around craftsmanship. It was very female-driven. And I think a similar thing can happen for OpenBazaar. We have a very male-driven, technology-driven, freedom-driven group of people who will be able to bootstrap the whole thing to a bigger audience. The third group of, the third asset in the ecosystem are the infrastructure builders. And there's two big ones. There's OB1, which is doing an amazing job. They have now 9 members working full-time. They're VC funded, and really at this stage they're just focused on core infrastructure, which makes it great for being an entrepreneur to build on top of OpenBazaar because you have people doing a lot of the heavy lifting at the bottom. It's kind of good to know who's who. There's only 9 people in the team. And it's roughly split 1/3 of the people working on the back end, one third of people working on the front end, and one third just doing other stuff. I guess one thing to mention, if you are going to build on OpenBazaar, is you will definitely get support. We will help you. At DuoSearch, we really want to help you, but you also get support from OB1. So there's a few channels which are kind of private. There's some private channels on Slack where you will get help, and there's also a private hangout that happens every 2 weeks, which is called the Partners Call, and this is really a great way to request help if you do want to get started. And then the second kind of infrastructure team that I'd like to highlight, because they're absolutely amazing, is the IPFS team. The IPFS team is one of the bedrock technologies for OpenBazaar, and not only for OpenBazaar, they want to be the bedrock technology for the next internet. And for them, they're really excited about OpenBazaar and want to see it succeed, because IPFS hasn't really been tested that much at a mainstream level, and it's possible that OpenBazaar will be the first application to do that. And then the final core asset of the ecosystem as an entrepreneur is the entrepreneurs themselves building technology on top of it. And there's about 15 companies or so doing stuff. But the way the ecosystem is segmented is not very diverse. So you have the search engines. You've had historically 4 search engines, and there's about 2 which are usable right now. And you've had the store hosting providers. You've had at least around 10 hosting providers historically, and of those, again, half are still being used. And that's it. It's very polarized, and it's very repetitive and not that diverse. There is one exception, which is BazaarHound, which was mentioned, which is a gateway for mobile apps. So there's really not much competition, and there's a lot of opportunities that I'll go into in my 4th part. So that's the survey of the ecosystem. Lots of core assets, including interested people, including a very enthusiastic group of vendors and moderators, including a very, very hardworking OB1 and IPFS, and also entrepreneurs like DuoSearch. Any questions so far? Okay, so let me tell you a bit more about the story of DuoSearch. I've been kind of a Bitcoin enthusiast since 2013, doing various Bitcoin projects, and I wanted to try and help the ecosystem go mainstream. And my first project within the Duo context was Duo Money, and I incorporated in March 2015 the company called Duo Money, for which the main product was itself called Duo Money. The idea behind Duo Money is that you can use your local currency to make Bitcoin payments. And as highlighted, the tagline back then was OpenBazaar for grandma. We wanted even grandma to be able to use OpenBazaar without having to worry about all sorts of difficult things such as Bitcoin. And we spent, about over a year building this this Duo Money app. And we had to ask permission from so many people. We had to ask permission from the App Store to get on the App Store. We had to ask permission from Bitcoin exchanges because we needed infrastructure to do the foreign exchange. And we had to ask permission from banking partners to be able to receive money from our customers. And on the 1st of April 2016, which is 5 days before OpenBazaar launched, I received a phone call from my banking partner saying, Justin, I'm so sorry, but we can't provide you banking services anymore. Now, being the 1st of April, I thought it was a joke, but it turned out it was not a joke. that I had actually lost my banking partner because they themselves had lost the banking partner. Kind of one of the links in the chain had fallen apart. And so we couldn't launch Duo Money on OpenBazaar, which was our aim. So on the 1st of April, the company completely shifts gear. And I guess in the world of entrepreneurship, we just made a complete pivot and decided to focus on Duo Search. And 19 days later, on the 20th of April 2016, we launched Duo Search to actually a pretty good launch. We had lots of retweets on Twitter. We were a completely new account, and we made it to the very top of the Bitcoin subreddit. And that really started a journey that has lasted 6 months so far, and has been extremely fast-paced. So I just want to highlight something here. It took us more than a year to build a permission app, which actually failed in the end. And it took us 19 days to build a really cool project on OpenBazaar. So that kind of shows you the power of open innovation, where you don't have to ask permission. So kind of bringing us to today, what is Duo Search trying to do? Well, really, we're trying to build the infrastructure necessary to eventually reach a mainstream audience. So we're looking at every single feature of e-commerce, or everything that is required from the point of view of the buyer. And if the technology is lacking in some way or another, we'll try and step up and build the technology required. And the way we've done this is with 4 big problems, user experience problems. So the first user experience problem that we try to solve is, how do you find stuff on OpenBazaar? The search engine, a lot of the time, just didn't return any results whatsoever and was very slow. The second question is, how do you navigate within OpenBazaar? It's kind of, there was this random list of listings, and people were really confused by that. The third question that we try to tackle is, who can I trust? You know, there's these vendors online, they just came up, I don't know them, there's no reputation attached to them other than very basic ratings, but a lot of vendors don't have any ratings. So how can I trust the person I'm trying to do business with? And the fourth problem that we're trying to address is, how can I use OpenBazaar on a normal browser like a normal person? You know, I don't want to have to download some separate piece of software to be able to do e-commerce. Well, the first problem of how do I find things, we just built the search engine in 19 days. The question of how do you navigate within the OpenBazaar listings, and how do you organize things? We actually built a categorization system, which is, and the way we did it is, we went through manually 9,000 listings, and one by one, very diligently, attached a category to it. And we built a top-level category tree, which was very clean, very well organized, and we assigned listings manually. Now, of course, this strategy doesn't scale at all if you have millions of listings, which is the eventual goal of OpenBazaar. So what we have now is an algorithm which, for every new listing, will try to see what the closest other listings are and automatically make an educated guess as to what category it should sit in. And that handles most of the work of categorizing. But we do have, after that, a second layer, which is human-driven, where we kind of correct mistakes and create new categories if that's relevant. So if you go on Duo Search, not only can you search, but you can go into the categories just like a normal e-commerce website, and you can find everything organized. The next question, how can you trust vendors? How can you trust moderators? I guess for moderators, Sam mentioned that we have this list of all the moderators who are online, and in a way, the way I think about it, how do you trust in a decentralized fashion? My answer is kind of a web of trust. And we kind of organically have this web of trust for moderators because every store can choose or choose not to use a specific moderator. So the more stores use a specific moderator, the more trust in that web of trust does that moderator have. And we're trying to bootstrap a similar thing for vendors. So in the context of a web of trust, the idea is if A trusts B and B trusts C, then to some extent, A can trust C. And this is what we've done. So we have a set of criteria for what we call a trusted store. And we've been giving away these trusted store badges. Now, because we have people in the OpenBazaar community trusting DuoSearch, and we have this list of trusted stores, then it's kind of a way for our buyers, our customers, to try out, or to see who at least has some trust associated with it. Okay, and then one of the things that we're working on right now is how can you use OpenBazaar from a web browser. As Sam mentioned, the World Wide Web and the OpenBazaar network are completely disjoint. They both lie on the internet, and we kind of need a bridge between the two. And these bridges, right now, for technical restrictions, they have to be kind of centralized. But there's a very, very cool trick, which is the one that blockchain.info uses, which is to do client-side and encryption of activity. So who's familiar with the blockchain.info model here? Okay, about half of you. So basically, blockchain.info will host encrypted wallets. So they have no access to your Bitcoins. And whenever you want to do a transaction, you download the encrypted wallet, you decrypt it client-side with your password, and because it's done client-side, blockchain.info have no knowledge of that, and then you can go ahead and do your transactions. And what this means is that you have convenience of the web browser while still respecting privacy and security. And as Andreas mentioned yesterday, doing privacy and security is costly. It takes a lot of effort, and certainly this approach is very difficult. But we want to be putting down the investments because, as Andreas pointed, the rewards are paid off in terms of freedom, and the way we think of freedom at DuoSearch is in terms of not just absolute freedom for one particular user, but in terms of effective freedom. So it's a bit like the PGP and the SSL comparison. At the moment, OpenBazaar is a piece of software that allows anyone who uses it to be extremely free in terms of trade. But it's only used by hundreds of people, so the effective freedom is quite low. We want to kind of bootstrap the same levels of freedom that OpenBazaar brings, but to an audience of millions. And I guess even further in our roadmap, one of the UX problems that we're going to try and solve, which goes back to Duo Money, is, how can I buy stuff on OpenBazaar with the money that I have? I don't want to be constrained by using Bitcoin. So yeah, that's the third part. Any questions so far? Okay. Cool. So let me move on to business ideas for OpenBazaar. This is a specific list that I have prepared, and while DuoSearch is really focused on buyers, I've tried to give you ideas on vendors, infrastructure that you can build for vendors, because this is really lacking at the moment. So we already have store hosting, and we have people who are starting to do store provisioning. Store provisioning is basically giving the vendor a tool to create his own store easily. For example, to spin up a store on a VPS, such as DigitalOcean or AWS. The next one is really important. We've had a lot of vendors who have an existing eBay store or an existing store on Etsy, and they could have hundreds, if not thousands, of listings. And there's no easy way to do migration. So if you want to make an impact right now, a meaningful impact, you can just, for example, write migration scripts and build a service around that. That'd be really cool. Another one that I have here is the idea of managed stores. So in the world of Airbnb, there's this really cool service called Guesty, which basically allows the host, the homeowner, to give his keys to Guesty and just to go away for a whole year. And Guesty will manage, on behalf of the landlord, the Airbnb guests coming in and out, and the cleaning and all that stuff. So it's basically managing a store on behalf of someone else. And I think this is quite relevant in the context of a new platform such as OpenBazaar, where a lot of successful vendors on eBay, for example, don't have time to bother with OpenBazaar because it's too small. But if you could provide a service saying, hey, I will use your brand name and I will sell your products on your behalf and just take a small commission, then that could be a great way to bootstrap OpenBazaar into something more mainstream. Another piece of infrastructure that would be great for OpenBazaar vendors is chat management. So at the moment you have a chat, which is great if you're chatting to, let's say, 50 people. But as soon as you want to chat to, I don't know, 1,000 people, it starts to become cumbersome. And you don't have a lot of features that the professional e-commerce platforms have. So for example, being able to auto-reply, or being able to assign a conversation to a specific support person, or being able to tag conversations, etc. So what we've done internally at DuoSearch, because we have one node which is extremely popular, it's the help desk node. So we provide for free help on OpenBazaar to anyone who asks questions. So we have this integration with Intercom. Intercom is one of the leading chat management services. And this kind of, I guess, is a general point in these ideas, is OpenBazaar is extremely new, yet the field of e-commerce is very, very mature. So a lot of the services already exist, and you should ask yourself the question, okay, if I want to build an OpenBazaar, should I actually build from scratch, or should I take something that already exists and integrate it? The next one I really like, and I really want to see someone go ahead with that, is basically build the equivalent of the Michelin guide for OpenBazaar. So the Michelin guide is this guide which has very strict criteria for receiving Michelin stars and various forms of review. And you could go ahead and become a professional reviewer. You'd probably get free stuff given to you from vendors so that they will review your store. I don't know, there's maybe business models around advertising that could work there. Another piece of infrastructure that's kind of a dirty one is SEO. So in the same way that people try to optimize their presence on Google, maybe some stores want to optimize their presence on search engines such as DuoSearch. So that could be a service you could provide. The next one I think is usually often overlooked by the initial set of vendors, and that's hedging and foreign exchange. So basically, as a store owner, you receive Bitcoin, and if you're not careful and you hold it for extended periods of time, the volatility can go against you. Especially if your liabilities and your expenses are in a different currency. So, there's definitely an opportunity for a service like BitPay to be integrated into OpenBazaar. And actually, I was talking to someone from Bitwala yesterday, and they're quite excited in this idea. So if you want to provide this service to vendors, go talk to Bitwala because they're interested in making it happen. The next one, DuoSearch has actually been doing it for vendors to try and help the ecosystem understand its weaknesses, is quality of service tracking. So when you run a store in a professional manner, you want to try and optimize the user experience for your customers. So you're going to want a very high uptime for your store. You want your store to load extremely fast. You want to be able to respond to your customers' chat messages with reasonable delay. And so all these things are just metrics that can be tracked. And if you can provide a tool that makes it easy for vendors to track the quality of service, that'd be great. The next one I've actually kind of talked about, it's gateways. So you know how there's gateways on the buyer side because buyers want to use web browsers to buy stuff. Well, actually, we also need gateways on the vendor side. If you think of applications such as Airbnb and Uber, they're actually mostly driven on the producer side on mobile. The taxi driver is not carrying around his desktop or his laptop. He's just doing everything on the phone. So, if you want to build the equivalent of Uber on OpenBazaar, then you're going to need to build these gateways. The next one's kind of a bit technical. It's IPFS seeding. So this is the idea where on the IPFS network, many computers can have a copy of your store. But what happens if, for some reason, someone can't access that data? Then it's kind of nice to have a last resort or guaranteed very fast or very good IPFS seeds. And there are business models there for getting money, and one of them is a bit cheaty, a bit ugly, is to basically provide the service for free to everyone, but make it artificially slow. So you kind of add, for example, 300 milliseconds of latency for every single request. So it works, but there's this noticeable delay. And if you want to be a VIP store and provide a really great service for your customers, you can reduce the latency down to 0, and they get a really fast service. Depending on what segment or what your goals are, Bitcoin tumbling could be a service that you could provide for OpenBazaar vendors. If privacy is a big concern to you, it's great to have Tor. But Bitcoin leaks quite a bit of information. So if you want to tumble that in a convenient way, then there's definitely an opportunity there. And just two final ones to quickly wrap up. One of them is logistics. So in the context of a professional store, you want to be able to do inventory management. You want to be able to manage the pipeline of shipping, packaging, and dealing with disputes, and tax management, and all that stuff. And there's existing software out there that you could integrate with, or that you could build from scratch if that's relevant. And the final one is kind of a general one, which is consultancy. OpenBazaar is this really new platform, and people need holding hand. People need experts to tell them what to do. And they'll pay you money to do it. So if you want to become an OpenBazaar consultant, there's literally zero competition. So that might be an opportunity for you. Cool. Any questions on ideas, business ideas? Okay. Cool. So I'll move on to tips. I apologize that I'm reading off my phone. It's just that it's a prepared list. So for me, one of the most important things, if you want to become an OpenBazaar entrepreneur, is really to be passionate about OpenBazaar. As Andreas said, these kind of open innovation, permissionless innovation systems are fueled by passionate ragtags, by misfits. And if you're not one of them, then it's possible that you're not appropriate. The second one, I think I kind of already told you, is kind of be technical. The technology is on the bleeding edge, and it's important to understand technology to understand the business opportunities. And it's also important to understand the technology to integrate your services on top of it. If you have no understanding of how a PFS works, then you either have to learn about it, or it's kind of very difficult to build on top of OpenBazaar. The next one is something really, really relevant to the current OpenBazaar entrepreneurs, and it's try and be social. So the current set of entrepreneurs are usually male, usually very technical, kind of geeky, and they will deliver some sort of service. They'll build it, but they won't tell anyone about it. So we've had this service that has been in development for 6 months or something called movies.com, and they've suddenly come out of the woodwork saying, we've launched, and kind of no one knew about them. So try and make a conscious effort to tell people about what you're building. And there's the community is like rather, is densely grouped in a few places. There's Slack, Twitter, Reddit. So just go to these places and talk to people. My next tip is just persevere, keep on going. There's this case study of one of our competitors in the search engine space. They were really keen because they started in 2014 building the search engine, and they were doing really well. They were gaining traction, they were gaining reputation, and people were using that search engine. But for some reason I don't understand, the development suddenly stopped as soon as the rubber hit the road. So as soon as OpenBazaar launched, we never heard again of the developer. Just completely disappeared, anonymous developer. And the search engine is now running in autopilot, which is a bit of a shame. The next one I think I've touched upon a little bit is kind of embrace competition. Because you're in this open innovation, it's also open competition. And so you need to really plan for it and even embrace it. With your success will come your competition. And the way I like to think about it in terms of embracing it is, number one, competition is a good way to up your game, to provide a better service. And number two, you can kind of co-compete, which is to compete and collaborate at the same time, because this is still very early days, and it kind of moves the whole ecosystem forward, which is great. My next tip is kind of time wisely. There's this one example of a service called Provistore that is providing hosting services, that wanted to provide hosting services. And they did a demo in April 2015. And the problem is that OpenBazaar only launched 1 year later, in April 2016. And 1 year is just an eternity in the startup world, and there was enough time to kill them. And we never saw the continuation of Provistore in production. Since it's already 45 past, I'll just jump ahead to my last tip. I will be putting these tips up online on blog.duosearch. So my last tip, and I think it's really great in terms of timing, is, so roughly speaking, if you want a working timeline as an entrepreneur in your head as to when OpenBazaar will launch, that's roughly in 6 months. That's my kind of wild guess, where it's good enough to be launched in front of lots of users. And 6 months is kind of the perfect timing, the perfect window of opportunity to build your product, to do some testing, maybe find a team member, to do a little bit of marketing, so that when OpenBazaar 2.0 launches, you'll be there, one of the very first, and you'll have the first mover advantage. So yeah, on that note, I'd like to encourage everyone who's keen to start building an OpenBazaar, and I'll take questions. Thanks.
I have one question. From the ideas you proposed, that are like all of them are really nice, and I would really love to see some of them really soon. Do you have any, like, your personal opinion, which ones will be implemented first and why?
So we're already seeing progress in store provisioning, and I believe that the OB1 team is working on a project called Easy Bazaar. There's also a script by my co-founder Daniel, who is called Auto Bazaar. That's one of them. It's possible that some of them won't happen anytime soon. So, for example, the hedging and FX, that's the volatility risk is a big problem if you have high volumes. But because the volumes are small, maybe there's less of a demand. Yeah, my personal guess in terms of which services would be provided first are store provisioning, it's basically to get started. Store migration, which is where you take an existing store and you put it in OpenBazaar, that's critical to get started again. And managed stores. Managed stores allow for an existing vendor to take a very lightweight approach to OpenBazaar.
Okay, and if you could reproduce by mitosis, the other instance of you would start which one of those projects, if you had another one?
I'm personally very excited by the managed stores. Yeah. I think, I think it's relatively easy to build a package which, scrapes anything from eBay, let's say, and then it's just a matter of convincing an eBay user that, hey, I'm just going to sell on your behalf. And that's actually something that my co-founder, Daniel, did. He's selling matcha tea, and it turns out it's not his matcha tea, it's an existing store online. And he's saying, okay, and the store owner said, I'll give you 10% of any transactions that you make. So 10% is a reasonable cut, I guess. And for the matcha tea owner, it's zero risk. And for Daniel, it's kind of the beginning of a business opportunity.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
As a search provider for the network, you get a sort of unique glimpse into what people are interested in the network. So do you have any particularly interesting stories or even just an overview of what people are looking for?
Most people are doing test searches, I think, and I think the number one search is marijuana and drugs. And I've learned a lot about the various available drugs because they're kind of the top 10. People are really, really interested in drugs and seeing if there's drugs available on OpenBazaar. It's possible there will be drugs coming for OpenBazaar 2.0 with the advent of Tor. And it's not something I'm advocating for, but that might also be an opportunity. to kind of focus on the darknet market. Duo Search specifically has taken an approach of not showing not safe for work content on the search engine, so we are doing some filtering. But there's definitely an opportunity to build a search engine which is specific for darknet stuff.
Any other questions? If we don't have any other questions, I would like to, again, thank you very much, Justin.
Thank you.